Robert, it's great to see you.
Great to see you, Rena.
It's my pleasure to moderate this fireside chat with Robert Cook, President and CEO of FINRA and Chairman of the FINRA Investor Education Foundation. Robert, I really want to thank you for being such a huge supporter of the Center for Financial Markets and Policy and FMQ, our conference every year. We couldn't do without you. So we are most grateful to you for all the support over the years and our strong partnership.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me back again. And congratulations on continuing with this conference, notwithstanding having to do it remotely, but it's always a terrific conference. And I congratulate you and your colleagues on being able to pull it off again.
So, Robert, we just finished a panel that was View from the Exchanges, and we had different exchanges, including Nandini Sukumar from the World Federation of Exchanges, and everyone was talking about, we went through 2020 and COVID, lots of stress on the markets, and there's so much that happens in the background that you're preparing every day for any contingency kind of event that happens. So what did FINRA learn from this real life test that came in the form of COVID? You know, how did exams change? How did arbitration change? How did that all work remotely?
Well, sure. Like everyone else, we've had to adapt during this time, and some things that we typically do in person were no longer possible to do that way. And so, just to mention a couple of areas, you touched on them. You know, historically, we've done our exams in person, and the cycle exams have always included an in-person element, and that obviously wasn't possible. So, I'm really incredibly proud of our team for how they were able to adapt. And really great collaboration with the industry, frankly, on being able to transition to a virtual environment for conducting those exams. And we've retained the flexibility to do on-site when we need to. But I think going forward, we're probably going to revisit how we do this. You know, again, we used to always do it. You know, 100% of cycle exams had an in-person component, and now we've done virtually none having in-person. I think the right place is probably in the middle, where we're taking more of a risk-based approach to deciding when we go on site. Another example that where we had to adapt was how we deliver tests. So as you know, to enter the industry, you have to take the Series 7 or other exams. And those are typically done in testing centers. Those closed down across the country for understandable reasons. So we quickly had to pivot and stand up an online testing capability. Since the pandemic, we've delivered about 85,000 online exams. Now the testing centers are open, people can go in person, but I think going forward, again, we're going to learn from that experience, and we'll keep that as an option, at least in appropriate circumstances, to be able to continue to take exams online. And another one you mentioned is the arbitration. So we operate the arbitration forum. Typically those were done with people coming together to discuss the cases or in front of the arbitrators. That was not possible. Again, we transitioned and we were able to do those via Zoom. Now all of our 69 arbitration locations are open again, but there's still demand for being able to do some hearings by Zoom. And a lot of in-person hearings, someone appears, like a witness might appear by Zoom. So we're working we've got a great arbitration task force that has industry representatives, representatives of the investor community, who are going to help us think about how we can continue to have a hybrid environment in this space going forward.
I got to say, it sounds familiar. At Georgetown University, we had to move to online classes and online testing, and we're trying to figure out, you know, what works online, hybrid, in person. And I think it's sort of shaken all of us up to think about things a little bit differently.
Well, and when I talk to a lot of leaders of other organizations, and like you, the challenge now is, how do we move to yet a third paradigm, right? from mostly in person to entirely remote, and now a hybrid. How do we make that work effectively? How do we bring forward what the best of both of those two worlds as we step into hopefully a new era post-pandemic?
So at any financial markets quality kind of a discussion, one has to talk about the role of retail investors, right? And what happened with the whole meme stock issue. On the one hand, I'm just delighted. I asked my students on the first day of class, how many of you have heard of some of these very popular trading platforms? And almost all the hands went up. And then I asked them, how many of you have actually traded on one of these platforms? And a whole lot of hands went up. And I was thinking, what does this mean for the markets and for financial literacy, sort of 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, right? If I'd asked my students the same question maybe 10 years ago, the answer would have been very different. So in some ways, I'm really encouraged that this will add to financial literacy. I want to get your thoughts on what happened with the whole meme stock phenomena and the increase in retail participation. What does this mean? And in terms of standards for FINRA, in terms of what might you be doing differently?
Well, what you're experiencing with your students is sounds very familiar with what we're seeing and what we're grappling with. On the one hand, it's great. We've got so much more retail investor participation. A lot of that, but not all of it, is through online brokers. We issued a report through our FINRA Foundation in 2020 that really looked at who are these new investors, especially in taxable accounts. And on average, they were younger, they had lower incomes, they were more racially diverse, and they had smaller balances in their accounts than those who had been investing before 2020. So this is all a good thing, greater participation in the markets. I mean, if we were having this conversation 10 years ago, we might have been talking about how do we get more, expand participation in our capital markets, which are an engine of growth for investors as well as for the economy. So that's great, but our challenge is to make sure that these investors, like all investors, are protected. So how do we encourage their participation while making sure that we're maintaining appropriate standards and that those standards evolve as we see new forms of innovation around how to engage with those investors and new forms of technology and the like. We do not want investors to be turned off by their experience in the markets. And so, look, you've asked about sort of the regulatory framework here. It goes without saying, the SEC has been very active in discussing this and laying out a number of areas they're looking at. They came out with their report on the GameStop events. They've issued a request for information around digital engagement practices. And so a lot of the issues that I think are front and center here are properly ones where the SEC is taking the lead, best execution, payment for order flow, all the market structure areas. And so first and foremost, when you think about FINRA, we're going to be working closely with the SEC to understand what they're proposing to do in this space to help inform their actions where we can, and then to figure out, well, what's our role given those areas of focus for them, how can we be constructive? But in the meantime, we've been very busy. We've, earlier this year, we issued a number of notices. Number one, reminding firms about existing requirements, right? How do you handle customer orders during extreme market conditions? There are standards in place for that. What about opening options accounts, which is a very popular way in which a lot of newer investors are getting exposure to the markets? We've had another notice on obligations for best execution in the context of payment for order flow. So we've been reminding firms about their existing obligations. We've been also launched a number of sweeps to understand how firms are complying with some of those obligations. For example, how are they doing account openings, particularly in an online environment? we have a sweep open on the use of finfluencers. So financial influencers using hiring people to help promote your services through social media. We have a sweep on SPACs, an area that there's been a lot of interest of late. And of course, we have some sweeps that were going on before last year around best execution, zero commission brokerage, and the like. So we're really exploring through sweeps what is the level of compliance today around some of the existing rules. And then we're also looking at how some of these rules might evolve. We've been working on a set of questions to solicit comment on regarding options and complex products, because we think that's an area that is particularly worthy of attention. And then we've also announced an initiative to re-energize our work around educating newer investors, particularly younger investors. We've got some great comment in response to solicitation for comment there. So there's a lot that we're working on. But again, I'll bring it back to, we're closely coordinating with the SEC, things like Reg BI and the like. We're going to be working very closely with them as they chart their path forward.
Yeah, you certainly have been busy, and the SEC has been extremely active. The good news is that our capital markets really performed really well during this stressful time. And if we look at the record amount of capital raising that has happened with traditional IPOs, with SPACs and direct listings increasing, you mentioned SPACs, and could you elaborate a little bit more? I mean, you oversee more than 600,000 brokers, you oversee sort of the underwriting process, and what are the issues that concerned you in this whole capital raising in the SPACs market?
Sure. Well, a couple of areas that we're focused on, and by the way, the types of questions we're asking here, as with all sweeps, we make those publicly available. So those who are kind of curious, well, delving into this in more detail can go to our website. But we're looking at things in the SPAC context around, for example, potential conflicts of interest. What does the underwriter or affiliate, what interest do they have in the SPAC, and how is that being disclosed? So that's part of the process for ensuring that investors have appropriate information around both the product and also those who are investing in the product. So there's a series of issues there that we're looking at, and then there's more generally, we're interested in how they're being marketed to investors. What are the marketing materials? Are those fair and balanced and otherwise consistent with existing rules we have around marketing? So there's a range of issues that we're looking at there. Again, we're not trying to suggest that the product is bad or anything like that, but it's obviously one of significant interest. It's got a lot of investors, a lot of focus by investors. We want to make sure that the intermediation process that our member firms have when bringing those to market, that that we understand what they're doing and that we're comfortable that they're complying with existing rules.
Yeah. Have you noticed that the market has already started to change in terms of the conflicts of interest, or what is the sponsor getting versus even disclosure, that in addition to maybe a little bit of pressure from regulators and policymakers, the market itself has changed a little bit since the early days?
It does seem that the market is evolving here, and some of that may well be in response to concerns flagged by not just regulators, but media or other interested parties. So there's probably as the product, which has been around for a long time, but as it matures and gets more, people have more experience with understanding what investors are looking for and where investors' concerns are, I think it's only natural we'd see it evolve over time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But Robert, you started talking a little bit about the use of technology and AI and machine learning. How are you using these in your monitoring, in your examinations, and How has this aspect changed over time?
Well, sure. And I think you, as you know, the in the markets area where we surveil trading by our member firms in the markets, we've had a long-standing and now well-developed approach to applying advanced technology, machine learning, artificial intelligence, because we've had to, right? It's an enormous amount of data. It's
Right.
structured data. It lends itself, this big data lends itself to using those kinds of tools. And so, just if you think about like the consolidated audit trail, the amount of data there, we've had on average this year well over 200 billion events a day. You need those sorts of tools to be able to analyze that. So we have a bunch of different patterns that we run to look for compliance issues, like are you complying with the rules, and also look for error manipulations of different kinds. And a big project in the last 6 to 8 months, Rena, has been frankly migrating some of that technology from OATS and legacy data collection systems to the CAT system, and we're substantially along with that process, and I think that's been very successful. But the area that we're really focusing on in addition now is the other parts of our program. You mentioned examinations and the like, where traditionally it's been more challenging to apply those sorts of tools. It's unstructured data, but we realize we have a lot of opportunity here to unlock the information that's hidden in that unstructured data that we collect, and to use things like natural language processing and text classification and extraction programs to really get more value out of the data we have. And so I'm really excited about that. We've got a multi-year project that our board has approved to promote advanced analytics, including in the areas where we haven't traditionally invested as much. And we've got a very significant, I think, and we've made a lot of progress so far around sort of pulling together all the things you have to do when you're doing a analytics transformation like this: technology, governance, people, culture, so we're in our first year of a 3-year strategic initiative here, and 3 years is just the beginning. This is going to be an area we're going to continue to be investing in forever. But I'm really excited about the opportunity we have to apply a lot of the sorts of tools we've developed and learned from on the market side to other aspects of our supervision of member firms.
And can you tell us a little bit about FINRA's Financial Intelligence Unit, and why was it created? What does it do?
Sure. Well, let me just step back for a second, because that unit is in our group called the National Cause and Financial Crimes Detection Program. It's a mouthful. We call it NCFC. But that's actually a relatively new unit within our member supervision group. So within member supervision, we have the NCFC program, and it was recently reorganized. And it really pulls together a number of different units that we had in place before, restructures them. It's really, the reorg was designed to reduce duplication, increase integration across these units, and their coordination with other parts of the organization. So think of it as having units like our internal review group, our initial review group. So the centralized point of intake, where we take in and review matters from a variety of sources that we monitor: tips, complaints, firm filings, arbitration filings, referrals from other regulators, and they help identify quickly potential fraud. They triage, they look for egregious misconduct. So that's one team that's here. Our National Cause program is within this unit. Our specialist teams that we have, like our AML team, or complex fraud team, our cyber team, our senior investors team. So they're all within this umbrella of the NCFC group. And one other team that's there is the one you asked about, the Financial Intelligence Unit. So this is really a part of the effort in this whole group to be proactive in our fight to protect investors and safeguard markets, and really also to provide firms with the information they need at times to protect their customers. And so, of course, all of our FINRA teams, I've always collected intelligence on potential threats and trends. We didn't always have a formalized process and framework to analyze those threats and share that information throughout the organization and with other regulatory partners in the industry. That's what this Financial Intelligence Unit, or FIU, does. It's looking at threat intelligence from both internal and external sources, connecting the dots, identifying trends. And a couple of recent examples might be of interest of things that they were able to work on. We issued a notice earlier this year about an increase in ACH, or instant funds transfer fraud. So we see something, we can issue a notice to firms so they can monitor for it and get ahead of it before something happens to them or to their customers. We issued a notice about to firms and investors about malicious actors hijacking registered representatives' names or other information to establish imposter websites and sometimes collect personal information from potential customers. Got a notice out on that so that firms and reps could get ahead of that. So this is what the FIU is designed to do, to help position us to be more proactive in the work we do.
And what about the whole issue of cybersecurity? How are you engaged in it? How are you working with your member firms on those issues?
Well, as I mentioned, our member supervision team does have a specialized group that does examinations in this area. But Rena, I think more generally, it's important to acknowledge that fighting cyber crime is really needs to be an area of close coordination and really partnership between government and industry. And we want to try to obviously make sure our firms are complying with existing standards, but we also see our role as helping to educate. We do a lot of programs, especially for our smaller firms who don't have the resources that larger firms do, to help provide awareness about best practices. What are the resources out there? What are the current threats that are out there? What are some of the steps to take when something happens? So we really want to help firms get in front of this issue where we can and help prevent the bad things from happening. We talk here about being left of boom, right? We want to be help address some things before they happen. And the other thing is that we're very cognizant we're not the only regulator in the space. So there are a lot of different regulators overseeing cybersecurity for some of our member firms. They've got many different regulators looking at what they do here. And so we want to play a constructive role, but without duplicating. One of the challenges that I think that can arise is if different regulators are adopting different standards for this, and that can create more confusion, unnecessary burden, frankly, can even sometimes create risk for firms. And so we're really trying to work hard to make sure that we're both having our firms comply with the existing requirements, but also try to do it in a thoughtful way that recognizes the challenges that are out there, and that we can play a really constructive role by helping firms with additional information and resources.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Robert. I want to get your comments on one quick last question, a very important question before we take audience questions. There are tons of audience questions here. So what role can FINRA play in addressing diversity in the financial services industry?
That's a great question, and thanks, Rena, for asking it. So we've been very focused for 10 years on diversity and inclusion at FINRA, but in the last couple of years, we formed a racial justice task force that has really looked at expanding our focus from just on diversity within FINRA to diversity in the industry and also in the communities that we serve. And we issued a notice earlier this year to ask the question you're asking, which is, what more can FINRA do? And more particularly, are there things that FINRA currently does that may create unintended barriers to greater diversity in the industry? We got some terrific feedback. I'm really appreciative of all the time people spent to give us some feedback on that. We got some actionable feedback as well. So for example, one of the challenges we've had for a while is that's been identified to us for a while is that if you leave the industry because you need to take care of your kids or your parents or whatever it is, it can be, and you're out for too long, you have to take the test to come back in. And that can be a real obstacle to coming back in. And the comment was that has a disparate impact on people. And so I'm delighted that the SEC just approved some amendments to our rules that will allow people to stay out of the industry for longer, and provided they take continuing education during that time online, they can stay out for longer without having to take the test to come back in. So that's the type of feedback that we got. Another area that we got feedback on is that sometimes we're asking, and this is sometimes the information is being requested by FINRA and other regulators to enter the industry has a disproportionate impact on traditionally underrepresented groups. And we ought to think about, do we really need that type of information, especially some financial non-conviction criminal disclosures that we require? I think that's a great comment, and that's something we want to look at. We want to work with the SEC and the states and other regulators who are part of the overall regime here, but I think that's an area of opportunity. So I'll stop there, but really delighted we got so many great ideas in response to that request for comment about things that we can do to help promote more diversity.
Great. So Robert, one of the panelists from the last panel had a question for you. And the question was along the lines of, how do you balance regulation and innovation?
It's a great question, and I'd like to also hear the answer from the previous panel. But look, I think that's sometimes there's a false dichotomy that rises there, that people think, well, you know, we got to innovation requires more regulation. I think we need to embrace innovation and encourage it. It's what has kept our markets so vibrant and at the forefront of the capital markets across the world. So we need to make sure that we're encouraging innovation, but of course we have to make sure that that innovation doesn't lead to outcomes that may be undermine confidence in the industry or hurt investors or markets. So I think that you can't just do whatever you want in the name of innovation. We have rules of the road that people need to comply with, but sometimes those rules need to be updated and applied in a thoughtful way when new technologies, new processes, new services come up that maybe no one had in mind when they wrote the rules. And so I think it's a great question, because it's really kind of like, how do you do your job kind of question, or, you know, how do you get it right kind of question, because there's no easy way to answer it. I think it's part of the dynamic judgment that we need to bring constantly, where we recognize that there is good in regulation, there's good in innovation, and we need to figure out how to strike the right balance.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking about college students, but one of the questions here is fintech companies are specifically targeting high school students, and should we be concerned? Who's watching out over that?
I think you know, there can be specific issues there around whether someone's at the age of capacity to be able to enter into transactions. So I think that's obviously a gating issue there. But more broadly, I think, again, we want to try to figure out how do we encourage greater participation in the markets. But it's always been the case that firms have wanted to target their product to particular types of individuals, and often that's great because they may have a specialty and be able to accommodate the needs of those individuals. But in each case, we have to make sure that, you know, that it's happening in a way that's consistent with current rules and that is consistent with investor protection. You know, for a long time, the conversation 3-4 years ago, we'd be talking about senior investors. Right. You know, right? I mean, that was where the right. energy was in this conversation, and it still needs to be, because it's still a big issue that we need to make sure. But that's just another example where firms might focus on a particular category of investors, and that can be great. We just need to make sure that people are following the rules of the road, and if we need to amend those rules or update them, we do so. Yeah.
Robert, thank you so much. This has been terrific. I'm sure our audience has really appreciated this, and we're delighted to have you back, and hopefully next year we'll be in person.
I look forward to that. Thank you so much for having me, Rena. Thank you very much.